When making my documentaries about Malcolm X's assassination, I interviewed everyone who was willing to participate. Everyone was of extreme value in this investigation. There was Charles Kenyatta, who poured his heart out for nearly 4 hours. Herman Ferguson spoke for 4 hours. There was Walter Ball. Malcolm's personal photographer, Robert L. Hagen, spoke. Earl Grant, Malcolm's top aide. Julian Gittins, former Nation of Islam member who was under Minister Malcolm X at Temple No. 7. And there was Sister Jean Reynolds Turner, who was beaming with so much black pride that Malcolm had given her, she could light up a completely darkened room without electricity, a light bulb, flashlight, or candle. Everyone who crossed her path could easily pick up on her positive energy. She's featured in many of my documentaries. I first became aware of her when she appeared on Gil Noble's Like It Is television show, speaking about her remembrances of Malcolm X, who she followed. Sister Jean and I became real tight every year since the passing of her husband in the late 1980s. She would hold a memorial celebration event for him, where hundreds of friends would attend. It featured jazz musicians, poets, singers, and other talented people from the conscious community. Her husband's name was Johnny, and Sister Jean told me that he treated her like she was Queen Cleopatra. He gave her everything she needed. Here's Johnny right here, bodyguarding Sister Betty Shabazz. I remember when Sister Jean first mentioned Johnny to me not knowing that he had passed. I said to her in an excited way, "Where's Johnny? I want to meet him." And she sadly told me that he had gotten sick and passed away. She told me he was a no-nonsense stand-up guy, who if he said he was going to do something, he did it. There was no shucking and jiving like people today who tell you they will be somewhere at a certain time and then they show up 1 hour later. People who boast about how much money they can get you, but never come through. She told me Johnny's word was his bond. She also told me that Johnny was out there. I never questioned her, but I believe Johnny was an associate of Harlem Godfather, Bumpy Johnson. I remember when Sister Jean showed me some pictures of Johnny for the first time. And I said to myself, he resembles Robert Lester of the Shylights. Yeah, but Johnny was no band leader.
When the government of South Africa began to trample upon the human rights of the people of South Africa, they were taken to the UN. When the government of Portugal began to trample upon the rights of our brothers and sisters in Angola, it was taken before the UN. Why, even the white man took the Hungarian question to the UN, and just this week, Chief Justice Goldberg was crying over 3 million Jews in Russia about their human rights, charging Russia with violating the UN Charter because of its mistreatment of the human rights of Jews in Russia. Now you tell me, how can the plight of everybody on this earth reach the halls of the United Nations and you have 22 million Afro-Americans whose churches are being bombed, whose little girls are being murdered, whose leaders are being shot down in broad daylight? Now you tell me why the leaders of this struggle have never taken it before the United Nations. So our next move is to take the entire civil rights struggle problem into the United Nations. And let the world see that Uncle Sam is guilty of violating the human rights of 22 million Afro-Americans and still has the audacity or the nerve to stand up and represent himself as the leader of the free world. Not only is he a crook, he's a hypocrite. Here he is standing up in front of other people, Uncle Sam, with the blood of your and my mothers and fathers on his hands, with the blood dripping down his jaws like a bloody-jawed wolf, and still got the nerve to point his finger at other countries. You can't even get civil rights legislation. And this man has got the nerve to stand up and talk about South Africa, or talk about Nazi Germany, or talk about Portugal. No more days like those. So I say in my conclusion, the only way we're going to solve it, we got to unite. 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 We got to unite.
To get information on past events, you've got to go back in time. To research, you can't rely solely on the internet, because everything concerning the past, present, and even the future may or may not have actually taken place. Of course, unless something in space and time actually happens. Only then can it be recorded as actual official history. Come with us now back in time to February of 1965, shortly before the most honorable Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, was betrayed, set up, and murdered by his own people. I was never satisfied with the conclusions I arrived at concerning the assassination of Malcolm X. Though many of the documentaries I saw, newspaper, magazine articles, and books that I read were extremely helpful, I wanted to do my own research and investigation. I started making my own documentaries on the assassination after I taught myself filmmaking. What you are about to see should scare the living daylights out of you, as it did me. And that's putting it mildly. Omar Ahmed was a member of Malcolm's Organization of Afro-American Unity. After Malcolm was slain, it was rumored that Ahmed, along with another man named Donald Washington, were on their way to Chicago to seek revenge against Elijah Muhammad. In the March 5, 1965 edition of Muhammad Speaks newspaper, in its editorial column, the equivalent of a wanted dead or alive poster of Ahmed in Washington was available for all Nation of Islam followers to see. Ahmed, in an effort to dispel the revenge rumor, quickly joined the Nation of Islam and received his X. But what this segment will cover is not Ahmed's experience while he was a Nation of Islam member. This is about an incident Ahmed experienced while he was a follower of Malcolm X. Late one night, in an office inside the Audubon Ballroom, a loud, ear-piercing screaming match between Malcolm X and one of his staff members was going on. Unbeknownst to Malcolm and the staff member yelling at Malcolm, another staff member had walked into the ballroom and heard the screaming match in progress. The staff member who walked into the rumble was OAAU member Omar Ahmed, who was formerly a member of CORE, an acronym for the Congress of Racial Equality. Omar had abandoned CORE because he wanted a different approach to combat racism. He was sick and tired of the turn the other cheek method. Omar was attracted to militants, so he joined up with Malcolm. Malcolm was highly respected by all followers in his two new organizations, the Organization of Afro-American Unity and Muslim Mosque Incorporated. That's why Omar Ahmed couldn't believe his ears when he heard a member of Malcolm's inner circle screaming at Malcolm at the top of his lungs. Omar Ahmed was headed towards the office to speak to Malcolm when he heard this commotion. Ahmed stood behind a curtain, stunned beyond belief. Ahmed wondered and tried to figure out what could be the possible cause for anyone who was an ally of Malcolm to raise their voice to Malcolm in the manner that was being expressed. Who would have the audacity to yell and scream at Brother Malcolm with all the stress he was under? Who would disrespect the people's hero who was on his way to take black people's case into the United Nations? What damn fool would verbally assault Malcolm like this? The man's house had just been bombed. He's been ducking and dodging would-be assassins since he was unjustly thrown out of the Nation of Islam that he flawlessly represented. Who would be so out of their minds, so disrespectful and cold-hearted to speak to the people's fearless champion in a ill manner except Malcolm's outright enemy? And then suddenly, the individual bolted from the office and ran into Omar Ahmed, still fuming from his encounter with Malcolm. The entire event was so outright frightening, Omar Ahmed thought he was catapulted into an episode of Chiller Theater. He was mentally paralyzed. He wished he hadn't heard what he heard. He wished it could have been somebody else. But he was blessed or cursed now with excruciating knowledge that he hadn't asked for. He felt a rumble in his stomach, and he hoped that the gas he passed was dry air and not diarrhea. What now? We haven't learned from our mistakes. We haven't learned from history. And it seems like we're not even participating in history. It's like we're on the sidelines just watching time go past. No input, no say-so, no complaints. Louis Lomax, born August 16, 1922, and died on July 30th, 1970, was an African-American journalist and author. He was also the first African-American television journalist. Born in Valdosta, Georgia, Lomax began his journalism career at two newspapers, the Afro-American and the Chicago Defender. Both newspapers focused on the affairs of the African-American community. In 1958, Lomax became the first African-American television journalist when he was hired by WNTA-TV in New York. In 1959, Lomax told his colleague, Mike Wallace, about a religious militant group called the Nation of Islam, which had a leader named Elijah Muhammad, who taught his followers to separate from whites who he said were human devils on earth. And to corroborate this claim about whites being devils, the Muslims said all you had to do was look at white people's evil behavior throughout history on this planet. Their greed, their aggressiveness, their continuous hatred and exploitation of dark-skinned people all over Earth, and in particular indigenous Africans and African Americans who were forced against their will and put into slavery for the sole purpose of serving whites. There was no argument, no debate. As far as Elijah Muhammad and his group were saying, the proof was in the pudding. With the evidence at hand, even the dumbest black person could easily demolish the most educated white person in a debate on this subject. This separatist group had a charismatic national spokesman named Malcolm X. In 1959, Lomax and Wallace produced a stunning 5-part documentary that was aired on national television called The Hate That Hate Produced. For the first time, most white people heard about the group from the airing of this program. On July 30, 1970, Lomax was involved in a one-car accident where witnesses reported that he was traveling at a high rate of speed and lost control of his rented vehicle. Lomax, not wearing a seatbelt, was ejected from the car. He was pronounced dead at the scene due to head and internal injuries. Author Carl Evans wrote in his 1992 book, The Judas Factor, The Plot to Kill Malcolm X, that Lomax was working on a documentary about the role played by the FBI in the death of Malcolm X, and that Lomax's sudden death may have been connected to Lomax's investigation about Malcolm's demise. Louis Lomax gained a sense of trust from various black organizations that he supported. Access to the Nation of Islam allowed him to interview a Nation of Islam minister, John Shabazz, about Malcolm's assassination.
To continue the Malcolm X story, the black Muslim story, here in our studio tonight, and I think for the first time since the Malcolm X incident occurred, we have Minister John Shabazz, the local leader of the black Muslim movement. Mr. Shabazz, the last time I saw you, we were together in this very studio. We had ridden through this studio, and you had driven the car. Malcolm X and I were in it, and we came here to debate on the Ben Hunter show. Remember that? Yes. What are you thinking now?
Am I thinking now?
What are you thinking now?
What's your question? What are you leading to?
Matthew, what are you thinking now? What happened?
Oh, in New York?
Yes.
I know only what came on the newscast, that Malcolm was shot in one of his own meetings, was shot down by parties that have now, from the newscast, been apprehended. Beyond that, I have no knowledge whatsoever. I heard Mr. Booker of the Amsterdam News, I think, who you just talked to,
Yes.
and I heard his comments on the feelings that are going on in Harlem. The unrest, as he mentioned, is quite possible. It's quite possible when you know that the police already have begun to point the finger at the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And naturally, we will...
Do you categorically deny that the black Muslims killed Malcolm?
Categorically, emphatically, and without any hesitation.
How do you know they didn't do it?
Well, by the same way that if you were to tell me that there was something flying over this building, I wouldn't have to know whether it was a duck or a goose or a sparrow, but one thing I'd know it wasn't a horse. By the very nature of the act.
Are you saying the black Muslims are incapable of firing a gun?
They're incapable of bearing arms. They're incapable of instituting violence. They are incapable of seeking out trouble because of that which the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has instilled.
Are you saying that no black Muslim has ever carried arms?
Yes, I'm saying this.
Never?
Never.
No member of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's movement has ever carried arms?
No follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has carried arms while being a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Prior to becoming a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, most of us carried
Well,
something.
Mr. Muhammad himself said this afternoon that he had no statement to make until at least tomorrow, and maybe not then.
Yes.
Now, how can you make a statement now who did?
I can make that. I didn't say who did it. I can tell you who didn't.
Well, Mr. Muhammad didn't say he did. One of his men did. He hasn't spoken yet. He said he didn't have anything to say.
Mr. Muhammad said at a meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, at which a member of the Los Angeles Police Department's upper echelon and a member of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department was there, that if any of his followers, if anyone who claimed to be a follower of his, ever was found bearing any type arms, he invited the police of all of this area to get in touch with him and give him...
I know that, but I mean today, how can you categorically say no member of the black Muslim movement pulled that trigger?
Because no follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would or could do such a thing. It is against the very tenets of our religion.
It's against Christianity for people to steal, but jails loaded with
It is against the practice of our religion. Not against the preaching, but against the practice
let's
of our
take this
religion.
tack, Mr. Shabazz. Has Malcolm X been here in Los Angeles since he defected from the movement?
Yes.
Has he been here since his last trip overseas?
Yes.
Are you aware of the fact that he was here just a few weeks ago and held meetings with some of your members whom he was trying to get to come and follow him?
I was not aware of any meetings being held with members of Muhammad's mosque. I was aware that he was in town.
Did you know he held meetings here?
No, I had no idea that he held meetings.
Did you see him when he was here?
Yes, I saw him when he
Did
was
you talk to him?
No, I didn't talk to him.
Did any of the members see him or talk to him?
None that I know of.
None of them had anything to do with it?
None that I know
Did you have any strategy as to what you should do if Malcolm attempted to make inroads into your movement?
No, none whatsoever. Allah is God. We worship Allah and depend on Him to keep the faith strong in the hearts of the believers behind the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
He once, though, was your number 2 man, wasn't he?
He once was the minister of Muhammad's Mosque number 7 and the chief spokesman
He was
for the
here in
Honorable
Los
Elijah
Angeles
Muhammad.
and you chauffeured him around.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Not as a lackey, but you were his minister here and he came here, right?
As long as I was not his minister. I am the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's minister and I've never been anybody else's minister.
So the point I want to raise is the fact that you had disagreements with him, we all know. But today, when the news was flashed that Malcolm X was dead, the members of the Church of Christian Fellowship, perhaps one of the oldest, best-known, middle-class Negro churches in town, paused in silent prayer, lifted an offering, and sent it to his widow. What did the members of your temple do?
We held our regular meeting. We taught the people that which the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us will uplift us, and we dismissed and we went home.
Did you say anything about Malcolm today?
We had nothing to say in our meeting about Malcolm whatsoever.
You didn't even discuss the fact that he was killed?
We did not even discuss the fact that he was killed in our meeting. We merely gave testimony to the fact that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had uplifted us and what he had done for us.
You mean to tell me that you can be as close to a man as you once were to Malcolm? And regardless of the fact that you broke with him on a theological argument, that upon his tragic death, there was no moment of prayer, no moment of anything, no telegram to Sister Betty, his wife, or anybody.
No, we made no attempt to make the telegraph to her. She has had every opportunity to continue to follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and to worship and serve the same God that I serve.
He's your witness.
One thing I would like to point out that
they referred to him as a white-eyed devil. They said that they prayed for the crashing of
breathing and
American
speaking of
airliners.
violence was the reason that Malcolm was dismissed from the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Mr. Muhammad is so against violence that the fact that Malcolm even condoned violence publicly made him be relieved as the chief spokesman for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Was that over the Kennedy assassination?
And he went over Muslim, yes.
But what do you mean by the Battle of Armageddon if you're not a call for violence?
The Battle of Armageddon is the final war between God and the devil.
And what's God?
What is God?
Yes, in your faith.
Allah, Master
In
Farad
other words,
Muhammad.
is not God the black man collectively taken?
We are taught by
And
the
is not the devil the white man collectively
The devil
taken?
is the white man,
Right.
collectively,
And God is the
individually,
black
any way
man,
you want to
and
take
so
it.
the Battle of Armageddon, if God's the devil, it's an international race war, right?
No, we've never heard that. I've never heard that from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, I realize that this is your viewpoint on it since you and Malcolm collaborated on when the word is given. But this is not what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us.
The message also...
He didn't collaborate on
Yes, he
it.
did. I interviewed him
You
on it.
interviewed him. He didn't collaborate.
He was afraid of us, too. He said some other doctor had done something to him.
What? That he didn't say. I've never seen a man so frightened in my life, Jack.
And that's what Malcolm said about Elijah Muhammad's reaction to the John F. Kennedy assassination. Malcolm said Elijah Muhammad, after all that bragging about himself being divinely protected, when he saw on television Kennedy getting shot, Elijah shook like a man with Parkinson's.
And even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the president as he made his way toward the Trade Mart. It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. There's numerous people running up the hill alongside Elm Street, there by the Simmons Freeway. Several police officers are rushing up the hill at this time. Stand by just a moment, please. Something has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by, please. Parkland Hospital, there has been a shooting. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound. I repeat, a shooting in the motorcade in the downtown area. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound. The president's car is now going past me. The limousine is now traveling at a very high rate of speed. Secret Service men standing up in the limousine. They are armed with submachine guns. It appears as though someone in the limousine might have been hit by the gunfire. Put me on, Phil. Put me on. Phil, am I on? We're here at the Trade Mart. The motorcade is coming by here. I can see many, many motorcycles coming by now, police motorcycles.
And I guess many of you have heard it said that his financial support comes from a rich man in Texas. I heard that while I was in the movement. I've heard it more since I left the movement. A rich man in Texas. You can look up, any of you can look up his name. But the FBI knows that too. But they still don't touch him. And never have I seen a man, and this rich man who lives in Texas, by the way, lives in Dallas. His headquarters in Dallas. His money is in Dallas. The same cities where President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And never have I seen a man in my life more afraid, more frightened than Elijah Muhammad was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I've never in my life seen a man as frightened as he was. And when I made the statement that I did, why, he almost cracked up behind it, because there were all kinds of implications to it that at that time were way above and beyond my understanding.
This is the December 20th, 1963 issue of Muhammad Speaks, published every 2 weeks in Chicago. On page 3, this item appeared. It's a report that Elijah Muhammad, from his home in Phoenix, telephoned the newspaper ordering that a statement be placed on page 1. The report goes on to say that the paper had already gone to press and that the statement could not be published until 2 weeks later in the next edition. The statement reads, "We with the world are very shocked at the assassination of our president." Meanwhile, a widely publicized statement about the assassination had been made by Malcolm X, then chief public spokesman for the Muslims. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad responded by suspending Malcolm and publishing this statement. When Minister Malcolm addressed the public and mentioned the president's death, he did not speak for Muslims. He was speaking for himself and not for Muslims in general. He has been suspended from public speaking for the time being. The nation still mourns the loss of our president. Malcolm's statement was that the assassination was a case of the chickens coming home to roost. Malcolm has since left the Muslim organization and has established his own organization in Harlem.
James, and I interviewed James just socially with Yuri Kochiyama, and James says that, yeah, he could be part of something to get rid of Malcolm, because he still, he felt that Elijah Muhammad had the best program. And we listening to him, right? Years later, and we assume that James was part of it. James tells me that he found, or somebody found, a shotgun, behind the stage, and then Malcolm was shot in the back. Now, at the time, James probably didn't know whether we were coming for him or not, right? So he's trying to probably study us, so he's giving us part truth. But I looked at the tapes. Look at James when he's leaning. He got something under his overcoat, which could be a shotgun. Now, I'm not going to say that. I'm saying that when James reaches down over Malcolm's body, it's something protruding from his overcoat. Just look at the tape. And he picks something from Malcolm and backs back and goes away. Look at the tape.
Whoever had the power to put 49 states on riot alert on February 21st, 49 states were on riot alert, before the assassination. Now, whoever can put 49 states and all the police departments in the United States, right, were on riot alert. Whoever can do that had pre-knowledge that Malcolm was going to be assassinated. So they must have had something to do with the assassination. Malcolm had me send Khalil Saeed in, and we sent Khalil Saeed in. He said there was no way that you could stop his assassination. And so, I said, we'll send in young brothers. So we sent in Khalil Saeed, who was from a Sunni Muslim family, and he was a youth. He was younger than me. He was about 18 in martial arts training to build the internal security with Malcolm. But he gets busted 10 days before the assassination on the plaque, on the Statue of Liberty plaque. Calls me the night before, right? And had split with me, going off with Collier and Walter Bowe, the biggest secret that was ever known in New York, that they're going to blow up the Statue of Liberty, right? Right? And he calls me the night before to meet with me that morning, right? And, I said, what's happening? He called me about 1 or 2 o'clock. I said, what's up? And he said, I just wanted to know if you were all right. I need to meet with you in the morning. And he was gone for 3 or 4 years. Now, what James says is that all of Malcolm's guns for his security was in Khalil Saeed's house. All right. So Malcolm was disarmed. His organization was disarmed 10 days, right? And they had to keep it secret. They couldn't, you couldn't say anything at that point. You didn't know what was coming down. But I had a 38 on me, a snub-nosed 38, right? Because, the biggest secret was that Malcolm was going to be assassinated that day. The FOI had been in the Audubon that Wednesday, that week before, and had practiced the assassination. Howard. What's Howard's name? Right. He told Jimmy Boggs that Elijah got $33,000 for the assassination to stay out of it. All right. And so, they were contracted through the Newark Mas. All right. And so, who knows who contracts somebody, right? And they probably didn't even know who contracted them. But Elijah was paid not to retaliate or just stay out of it, of the assassination. He knew pre-hand, and who was his secretary, who was Mike Simmons' brother? John Ali. All right, so John Ali did the contracting.
Let's go back in time to February of 1965 to take a look at William Bradley, the man who took Malcolm X's life and stopped Malcolm from presenting the case for reparations at the United Nations building. I was never satisfied with the conclusions I arrived at concerning the assassination of Malcolm X. Though many of the documentaries I saw, newspaper magazine articles, and books that I read were extremely helpful, I wanted to do my own research and investigation. I started making my own documentaries on the assassination. What you are about to see should scare the living daylights out of you, as it did me. And that's putting it mildly. The person you are looking at is William Bradley, who in 1965 was a member of the Nation of Islam. He's the one who was identified as the shotgun-wielding killer who gunned down Malcolm X inside the Audubon Ballroom. Bradley can be seen in this footage wearing a dark overcoat with a folded newspaper in the left pocket of his coat. The footage shows Bradley attempting to rescue his fellow Nation of Islam partner in crime, Talmadge Hayer, also known as Thomas Hagen, who was apprehended by Malcolm X followers. Bradley walked away from the crime scene, a free man, disappearing in the wind like a fly off ship. National Secretary for the Nation of Islam, John Ali, has gotten up in age now, and all his friends who helped him destroy Malcolm X are gone. Historians and filmmakers who are studying Malcolm's assassination are still trying to locate the WVON radio broadcast aired in June of 1964, where John Ali said on live radio that the Nation of Islam was going to murder Malcolm. The broadcast was moderated by Wesley South in the city of Chicago.
Opinions expressed on the following program, Hotline, are not necessarily those of the management of WVON or the participating sponsors. Hotline, a program of public comment. A program where you voice your opinions and ask the questions of our hotline guests. And now, Wesley South and Hotline.
Famed newspaper columnist for Chicago's American Daily newspaper was the legendary Wesley South. South joined WVON Radio in 1963 and became a talk show host moderator. National Secretary of the Nation of Islam, John Ali would appear on Wesley South's radio show in June of 1964 and make some serious death threats against Brother Malcolm's life that should have led to Ali's arrest. The Nation of Islam was foaming at the mouth in trying to kill Brother Malcolm because he revealed that the Nation of Islam was on white America's payroll to remain nonviolent and inactive in the black struggle. Malcolm, in June of 1964, stood in front of television cameras and spoke about John Ali and the fruit of Islam's promise to murder him.
And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, was moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the National Secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself.
Still shaking from seeing his president getting shot on live TV, Elijah Muhammad calls up his national secretary, John Ali, and tells him to call all Nation of Islam ministers and officials to tell them to keep their mouths shut on President Kennedy's assassination. John Ali calls up Elijah Muhammad's ministers and gives them the order. He calls them all except Minister Malcolm. Ali, anticipating that Malcolm is bound to say something in regard to President Kennedy because Malcolm believes the FOI will back him in case there's any backlash. But Malcolm has fallen into a trap. John Ali has now schemed against Malcolm with another sworn enemy of Malcolm, Captain Joseph Gravett. The jailer's lock has been picked. The trap has been set. Malcolm is about to walk right into a well-planned setup to get pounced on. This is how the infamous backstab went down. Before the Kennedy hit, Elijah Muhammad had already made plans to come to New York City to do a speaking engagement on Sunday, December 1st of 1963. But he was so shook up over the Kennedy assassination, he canceled the speech for fear that he would get whacked out next. So he had Malcolm take his place. And that's when the trap was sprung. When Malcolm made that chickens coming home to roost statement, the statement would be used as a pretext to take Malcolm down. And just as John Ali promised when he was on that radio talk show in June of 1964, the Muslims were going to absolutely kill Brother Malcolm. And the leader of the Nation of Islam would declare that his God, Master Farad, was part of the hit team.
This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. And I think the people will learn that this was some work of God himself. This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. And I think the people will learn that this was some work of God himself. This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. And I think the people will learn that this was some work of God himself.
A chilling accusation was made by one Muslim Mosque Incorporated member to another before a packed audience. The charge was so combustive, it's a miracle the building didn't self-ignite. You could hear a pin drop.
Peter, it's very nice to see you. I haven't seen you in such a long time. As you know, many of those early meetings of the formation of the OAU was held at my house. And Brother Razad, Abdullah Razad, Mohammed Babu was the leader of the revolution of Tanzania, and that's why they joined the two states, Tanganyika, and they joined Zanzibar, and they joined the two and make it Tanzania. That night, I went with Malcolm and I went to United Nations, and I have pictures of Mohammed Babu, myself, and Malcolm and Che. And I was on the stage that day when Mohammed Babu was there. As you mentioned, when Malcolm came back from Detroit and made the Ballad of Bullets speech, as you will remember, we recall, we all brought our guns to the Audubon Ballroom that particular day. But the question that I want to ask you that has been bothering me for 34 years and that I have never said anything about is an encounter between you and I during that time, shortly before Malcolm's assassination. As you recall, Sheikh Kassoum was here, and I walked in. You had been telling Malcolm that Brother Benjamin was not fit to be the minister of the mosque anymore because while Malcolm was overseas, he was having an affair with Sharon, and you were asking Malcolm to set him down. On the day in December, Malcolm asked me to speak and take the collection and everything, as you know, and I spoke again and took the collection. But the day of his assassination, that Friday, he had called me into the office to talk to me about opening up for him because you had told him the things that was going on between Benjamin and Sharon. When I walked into the office, you did not know I was there, and you and Brother Malcolm was in the inner room in the inner office. And y'all were having a screaming match like I've never heard before, you and Malcolm. And I had never heard anybody talk to Malcolm the way that I was hearing Malcolm speak to or spoken to by you. When it was over, you came out and you discovered me there. You grabbed me by the arm and you took me out in the hallway, and this is what you said. You say, he's waiting to see you. He wants to see you. And you tell him that if he doesn't do what we want, we will kill him. You told me to tell him that. That day that Malcolm was killed, as you know, let me back up for a minute. As you know, there was a dress rehearsal for Malcolm's assassination. You went in the back, told the brothers to put down the chairs. These were folding wooden chairs. The brothers started putting down the chairs and they started snapping like 22s. You would think it was a 22 gun. That's when the brothers jumped up and said, get out of my pocket. And those of us who were at the stage bolted from the stage, and Malcolm said, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy. Peter, if you remember, I came backstage with you, and I was back there that same particular day. In fact, I actually went on stage, and Sister Sharon was on stage at that point. And Malcolm, one by one, called all of us off stage and gave each one of us an assignment. I don't know what your assignment was for that particular day, but he gave each one of us an assignment, as you recall. My assignment was to look for Reverend Glamonson and Rob Cooper. I'm so sorry that Percy Sutton and Charles Kenyella left before I had the chance to see this. I begged them to stay because I told them I was going to ask this question.
But the question, please.
This is the question. When you told me that if Malcolm doesn't do what we want him to do, we will kill him, what did you mean by that? Now, this is not hearsay. This is nothing I read, y'all. I was very, very close to Malcolm, as Brother Abdullah would tell you. And often days, he's a very, very important person because he was Malcolm's personal secretary. But only in the daytime. At night, I was with Malcolm, along with Charles Kenyatta and Benjamin and Sidney and Gladstone and a whole lot of other people. So I want to know, what did you mean? And why were you having that argument with Malcolm in that tone of voice? And when Malcolm was overseas, the first time I went on television for Malcolm, Malcolm sent me a telegram and told me to go on the David Susskind. The next 2 times that I went on television for Malcolm, you told me to go on television for Malcolm. So my question is, what did you mean when you took me out in the hallway and said, if Brother Malcolm doesn't do what we want him to do, we will kill him?
May I answer? 1, I have never screamed at Malcolm in my life. 2, I have never sent you on a television program in my life. 3, you say that you have never said this? Since 1988, when I came back here, I have been told that you and a Gene Reynolds have been going around saying that I had something to do with Malcolm's murder, and you could not tell them why. Brother Omar Shabazz, are you in this audience? Did this man tell you that I had something to do with Malcolm's murder? What did he give you as reason for this statement?
Brother, I'm telling
there
you.
Was no reason given. Can I listen to you now? Will you listen to me? You have libeled me.
I haven't said it behind your back. Then you went on television when you were here last. You went on television on the Gil Nova show, and you brought up my name again in terms of being a part of the assassination team. You called me. You called me at the 10:30 at night. You called me on the night that Malcolm was assassinated and told me that the Guardian was going to call me on the phone and to make a statement. You called me.
Okay,
you called me on the telephone after Malcolm was assassinated and asked me and told me to make a statement to the Guardian about the assassination. I did not make that statement because my wife told me it was a setup. The next morning, I found myself on the front page of every newspaper in the United States of America heading an assassination team to assassinate Elijah Muhammad. I ultimately got shot 8 times out of that incident. You're going to tell me that this never happened, that you didn't call me on the phone, you never spoke to me?
I'm going to tell you that you are a very ill man, and I suggest that you get psychiatric treatment. But what I would like to do while you are here, I would like to tell this audience that any time this man or anyone else would like to accost me in front of a lie detector to determine whether I had anything to do with Malcolm X's death, I am glad to do so. Malcolm X was an idol to me. I worked with him for 1 year as I said I would, and as of March the 12th, I left. Brother Omar here had a typewriter, a IBM Selectric. When Brother Gaidi came here from Africa and brought the statement that Brother Malcolm had made, I borrowed the typewriter from him. He lived over on 5th Avenue. The Organization of Afro-American Unity, Brother Malcolm wanted to make a statement to tell blacks not to join the armed services. He did this at this Omar's house. I said, you can't say that, brother. That's sedition. You can't say that. At the same time, there was a no-knock law being proposed that people could break into your house without knocking. I said, go against the no-knock law. That's unconstitutional. No warrant shall issue except upon probable cause duly describing the person or articles to be seized and the premises to be searched. Brother Omar, since I was in Guyana for 12 years, when I came back, I was told by people here that this brother has been going around saying I had something to do with Malcolm's murder. I have never called him and told him anything about Brother Malcolm. I've never screamed. Any one of you that knew Malcolm, you could only scream at him one time, and then that would have been it. I have disagreed with Brother Malcolm, and 2 or 3 times I resigned from the organization because I got tired of people like Omar, who was supposed to be involved in real estate, and Brother Malcolm was considering purchasing a building on 132nd Street between Lenox and 5th, I believe. Brother Omar was supposed to be taking care of this, but when Brother Malcolm got on the plane, Omar disappeared. When Brother Malcolm came back, Omar would be there. That's the type of person he was. Brother Charles 37, who I understand was here, came and told me once, brother, they're saying you're a communist. They're saying you're an FBI agent. I don't think you should be teaching. Well, Omar is a person that has a good voice, so I said, well, do you want to teach? So he started teaching, and Brother Malcolm took him down from the podium from 100 and some street and 8th Avenue. I have never killed a human being in my life. And anyone who thinks that I could want any harm to Brother Malcolm, the ironic thing to me is that when people were talking about killing Malcolm, I was the one who called him up and told him this. I was the person, as someone said, Malcolm wouldn't eat. If Malcolm wanted coffee from chock full of nuts, I had to go get it. Malcolm accosted me once and said that I was secretive. Oh, everybody is saying you're secretive. I said, this was on the plane going to the Cup show. I said, I am secretive. I'm your secretary. There are things I told you tonight I've never told anyone. And there are things I know about Malcolm and his problems in his personal life that I've never mentioned to anyone. I told this to Gil Noble. Why would I want to do Malcolm any harm when this is the person that I gave a year of my life? This man, Omar Ahmed, is very ill because the things that he said, I've never called him. I never called him for any reason. The only thing I had to do with him is get him back his IBM Selectric typewriter. And since I've seen him on 135th Street 3 or 4 times, he was running around with a guy named Donald Washington, and the only newspaper that I know of that carried a picture of Omar and Donald Washington was the Muhammad Speaks newspaper. That's the only one I saw. And it said that they were on their way to Chicago to kill Mr. Muhammad. This was much before Malcolm was killed, and that's what made Omar join the nation. He got scared because he felt that the brothers was coming to get him, so he joined the nation. He was here last year when you gave this thing, and he said that Malcolm wasn't important, that Sidney Poitier was more important. Is this the same brother?
Well, what we will do, because we do have to get out of here by 8 o'clock, there are vendors outside waiting, and I'm asked to bring it to a close. But Peter Bell, you haven't had a chance to respond to anything, so you will have the final word.
Oh.
In the book, Malcolm X, The FBI File by Arthur Claiborne Carson, on page 404, a FBI document states that Abdullah Razak, also known as James 67X Shabazz, instructed all Muslim Mosque Incorporated members to say to the police that they fell on the floor when the shooting started and cannot identify the person or persons who shot Malcolm X. Is accuser Omar Ahmed making false charges? Is Omar Ahmed out of his mind? It makes you wonder just whose name was on that list taken from Malcolm.